All right. So let's jump into the passage that we're doing today. Okay, so we're actually getting into rhetorical analysis. So what we looked at with the New York Times article is basically how to chunk stuff, right? And looking for big ideas. So we are going to do the same here. Now, you have 2 minutes to annotate everything you're supposed to in the prompt. So remember back to our video, everything that you're supposed to deconstruct or pull out from the prompt. You have 2 minutes, go. All right, stop. All right, when we are looking through this, what did I tell you you need to look for? Okay, so background. First sentence, what are we looking at? What'd you find? Okay, so we know that this is your author, speaker, right? Okay, we don't know anything much about him right now. What else? Okay. What's important about April 1861? Okay, so this is what we call a golden nugget from College Board. Why? Because if there is anything within a passage or a prompt that they think you don't understand or you may not know, they're going to provide it for you. Okay, or they're going to provide you context. So in 1861, I could say, oh, what's going on in the 1860s? You probably, hopefully, at some point within the year, will be able to say it's the Civil War. Okay, but because they said April 1861, they told you that is the first month of the Civil War. So, one, it tells you the location. So, in reference to the Civil War, where is this speech given? Right? And the Union in the North. Okay. What does the Union stand for? For freeing slaves. Okay. Now, we know that, so we take that. But now we say first month of the Civil War. How does that make the speech different? How does that change we haven't read it yet, but how does that change the message that is going to be given now as opposed to 2 years from now? How is this different? What's the mood of the country?
Probably not like negative, like war's not going on
Okay, so the war, like we're not far enough into war and to be, let's say, not far enough into war to be what? To be desperate. Good, I love it. Or hostile, yeah. Though, I mean, the North and the South are kind of like that already, right? Okay. What else? In the country, so think this, like, what has happened previous to this?
South seceded.
Okay, so the South seceded, there's a lot of tension, right? But in our country, we have already removed ourselves from a king, right? So we've already been in a very arduous battle, right, with another country for our freedom. And here we are as a country battling, getting ready to battle each other. Okay? So realize that. Okay, good. Now, what is important in the next sentence?
Identifies Alfred as African American.
Not till the very end. Right? Because here it just says African Americans were not yet. Green felt that they should, right? But so here is key. Right? So now we know that Alfred Green, please refer to him as Green, not Alfred or Alfie, right? It's happened, that's why I say it. We identify him as African American. This whole speech is completely different if you don't see that he is African American. You misread the text, which, and we'll talk about once we go through the rubric, if you misread the text, you can't get higher than a 4. 5 is passing. So if you read and write this whole paper as if Alfred Green is a white American, you can't get higher than a 4 because you've misinterpreted everything. Tone, purpose, audience, everything. Okay? What in this second sentence is important?
That the African Americans were not yet permitted.
Okay, so this is giving us context to his speech. Not yet meaning that they will be, right? They will be soon or should be. And now we know Green's opinion. So this is our, this is his point of view. Now also realize that we're at a time in the country where, especially in the South, they believe it is their God-given right to own slaves. So we are looking at a battle of religion, like religious perspective, like differences in religious perspectives. We're in a battle of breaking tradition, right? And that's very personal, okay? All right, now that we've done that, so the other thing that we look to do is what we talk about. I think I talked about this in the video a little bit, the rhetorical triangle. The rhetorical triangle, which is the speaker, audience, and purpose, right? So we know about the speaker. The audience, we try to go audience to the third power, and that should go up high. We try to go audience to the third power. If you're not writing everything down that I'm writing down, you are a fool. I will tell you that. All right, so audience to the third power means that we're going 3 deep, right? And we always want to identify more than the reader or Americans, okay? Because it's too general. What we want to do is we want to create talking points for ourselves later. So do you ever feel like when you're writing an essay that you find the piece of evidence, you just don't know what to say more than like 1 sentence, and then you like struggle from there? If you can identify multiple audiences, you can say how this piece of text or this piece of evidence affects the first audience, and then the second audience, and then the third audience. So now you're building ways for you to talk about stuff, okay? So if we're looking at Philadelphia, first month of the Civil War, what's one level of our audience? Okay, yes. African Americans, freed and slaves, so both. Okay, who else is our audience? Who else is physically in that audience?
People of Philadelphia.
Okay, which are who, probably? Okay, so you have union members, so specifically probably white men. You also probably have some old white men. That's what our history is filled with, right? So you have old white men that are set on tradition. But we're also in the North to where they're a little bit more open-minded to changes. All right? All right, good. Now we've done that. Now we find our task. What's your task? Mm-hmm. Okay, what you'll find here is analyze the methods. This is kind of, this is our lingo that's changed. So one of my jobs over the next, 6-7 months is to expose you to like our different prompts, all right? So over the last and then you'll notice this is from 2003. So over the last 15 years and prior to that, our language and our prompt has changed. They've said here the methods. We have seen the rhetorical strategies. We have seen the rhetorical choices. Now we're seeing just the choices. So our prompt today would probably more likely say, analyze the choices Green makes in order to achieve his purpose. I mean, it is as blank as that. But it all means the same thing, right? We're always looking for strategies. We're looking for organization. We're looking for syntax. We're looking for all the little things. So whatever that language is, it always means the same thing, right? All right. Now, there's your task. You also, in this task, have your concrete part, which will be your thesis, part of your thesis. What is the concrete part? This persuades his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. That is your concrete. There is still an abstract. So this is the concrete. This is what he is literally doing. But why is he getting them to do this? Why does he want them to do this? That will be your big idea. Okay? All right. So at the top, now, I'm going to say the question that I'm looking for is why should they join? So remember, we write that at the top so that if I get lost in my annotations, I go, okay, what is he saying about why they should join? All right. How many of you found all those things and did all those things in your prompt? Don't be ashamed. If you did, good. If you didn't, wah wah. This is why when I say you need 10 minutes to read and annotate and plan, a minute and a half should be spent there. Sometimes there'll be a lot of stuff in there. Sometimes there won't. Marquard, for us, there wasn't a whole lot. We couldn't build historical context. We couldn't build all that, right? So, and what do you do if you don't have historical context? You just move forward and do your best. You don't have to know history, but here it comes in very handy. Those of you that are history buffs, this course will be a lot easier for you, okay? All right, now I've done that. Now what is my next step? What do I tell y'all to do? Number your body paragraphs. So the time is 1. It is true is 2. It is true is 3. Our duty is 4. Let us is 5. The other thing that I notice the footnote. If there is ever a footnote, I always tell my kids, find a way to analyze it. Because it's another golden nugget from the College Board. They are giving you a footnote that helps you to better understand the context of that example. I would say maybe in the last 15, 18 years, we've seen very few footnotes, but there are some. So make sure that if you get them, you read them rather than in a book, y'all usually just go, right? These are ones that we actually want to read. Okay, now I've numbered, now what? Not annotate. Locate the shift. Do you remember any of the, remember we're going to guess. So what are some of the things that I told you to look for when we're looking for or guessing a shift? Transitional words. What else are we looking for? The break in the columns. Now, one of my friends, we used to be on the committee to write the test, and they said years and years, before this, so I think pre-2000, they would just have one passage, right? It wouldn't be broken into columns. So when they started breaking it into columns, he said we look for a break in the columns where there is a shift around. Not all the time, but sometimes there's a shift in there. And then what else do we look for when we're looking for organization or shifts? Okay, so length of paragraphs. Short to long, long to short, short to long to short, right? And then if all else fails, we're just going to guess in half. If we can't see any of those things, that's why we number. We're going to take it in half and just guess. That gives us a purpose as we're reading. So if we looked at this, what would we say? Where would you guess? After paragraph 3, why would we guess there? Yeah, it goes from short to longer. Okay. Good. I'm going to start annotating with you. I'm going to tell you that this is the toughest part because you're not going to see some of the things that I see. And that's okay. You won't in the beginning. My job is to kind of open up some things to you so that you start seeing different things. All right? A couple of keys when I annotate. I won't tell you to annotate a certain way. Like underline this, circle this, do that. It's your own pattern. The one thing that I do is I put hearts around conjunctions. I don't know if I told y'all that yet, but I put hearts around conjunctions because, especially and but, because you can sometimes see a pattern. When you step back from your annotations and you see the hearts in certain sections, then you can go, ooh, why are the conjunctions used in those sections as opposed to other sections? Or why multiple conjunctions, right? So those are some of the things that I look for. So putting a heart around it makes it a little different for me. I also look for semicolons and dashes. Those things stand out to me, so I try to annotate those a little bit more closely, right? All right, here we go. I'll read a little bit and then I'll tell you what I see. The time has arrived in history, in the history of the Great Republic, when we may again give evidence to the world of the bravery and patriotism of a race in whose hearts burns the love of country, of freedom, and of civil and religious toleration. It is these grand principles that enable men, however prescribed, when possessed of true patriotism, to say, my country, right or wrong, I love thee still. All right. So what I would say is this. Now I'm going to go look back. Quinn, if you want to pay attention, and that'd be great. So what I would say is this. I'm looking for a couple of things. Notice what you'll see that I am not looking at labeling devices or things. Because remember, what am I looking for? Why join? So he's arguing. Why should they join? So I have to look for what is he trying to tell them? And how is he telling them it? Okay, so here we go. I'm looking here at the Great Republic. So that's just a modifier, right? Obviously, he's talking about America, but you also have to understand who he is. So he can't jump out and go, this country sucks. It's all terrible. Screw America, right? He's a African-American black man living in the North. He's got to say his piece, but he's also got to be mindful of who his audience is, okay? When we give evidence of the world of bravery and of patriotism of a race. What race? The African-American race, in whose hearts burn the love of country. Now notice this is repetition, right? The of freedom, but notice it's what we call an ellipses. So it's the word taken out of a phrase, of a repetitive phrase. So it's implied, who burns the love of country, love of freedom, and love of civil and religious toleration. Right? Do you have to know it's an ellipses? No, it's fine. But you can hear that pattern, right? Okay, so we're not talking about the repetition of the word of. We're talking about what's attached to that word. Now, he is talking about a race of men that do not have freedom. in the majority of the country. Why would he say we are talking of a race of men, or a race in whose hearts burn the love of country, of freedom, and of civil religious toleration? Why is that important to the people in his audience? What does that point out? Emma, go ahead.
It's kind of in opposition to almost their viewpoint. Like, his audience experiences this freedom and experiences civil and religious toleration, but he doesn't, and his people don't.
Okay, so he's creating this contrast from his audience and African Americans. Also, friends, why did we leave the king? What did we want? Freedom. Religious toleration. Civil toleration. Because why? Our love of our country. Our countrymen, really. Right? So we're also pointing out that this is the same thing that we did with the king. It is these grand principles that enable men, however prescribed. What does he mean by proscribed? When possessed of true patriotism, to say, my country, right or wrong, I love thee still. What is wrong about the country? And what is right? Freedom. So notice he says, here is a race of men, a race, I keep saying men. Here's a race that loves their country, even though we are slaves. So we love our country just as much as you do. Now remember, he's trying to convince African Americans to join, like that they should have the ranks in the Union Army, right? So why do people go fight in a military, like in the army? For what? To protect their country, for love of country. And he's saying, look, there's no difference between us, right? It is true, the brave deeds, and I'm going to mark that because when I was scanning, I saw that it was down below too, right? It is true, the brave deeds of our fathers, sworn and subscribed to by the immortal Washington of the Revolution of 1706 and by Jackson and others in the War of 1812, have failed to bring us into recognition as citizens, enjoying those rights so dearly bought by those noble and patriotic sires. All right, what are those two wars? We notice that we have those two things. Yes, he's calling him immortal Washington. Okay, so what? We're looking at these two, the Revolution of 1776 and the War of 1812. What was the basis for those wars? Freedom. Do what? Say it again? Yep. So it's this constant battle for freedom. So notice he says, yes, Washington and Jackson did a great job getting us freedom. But what?
Yeah, they didn't get freedom for us.
They didn't get it for us. He's not being sarcastic. So be careful when you identify or when you hear a tone. Sarcasm is one of the last tones you should hear. And we tend to go to sarcasm when we don't know what else to say. He is not being sarcastic. Y'all, he can't be, right, in this situation. So what does it mean it is true? In an argument, when you go, it's true that, what is that? You're getting ready to go to your friend's house for the weekend. You go, Mom, Dad, it's true that Emma's parents will not be there. Conceding. Yep. So that is a concession. Why does he need to concede to his argument? If we're like, let's say to the African Americans, why does he have to concede to the African Americans? Listen, I understand that that Washington and Jackson have taken us through these wars. I get it. They've done it. They didn't get us there. What does that do for his audience of African Americans that are listening to him?
Saying like, since, sorry.
It's okay.
saying that, like, since they didn't get them there, like, they should get themselves there?
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to imply that, okay, they got us to a certain point, but at some point it's our responsibility. What does it do for the white men or the people in the Union now, hearing him say that? It's true that Washington and Jackson did this. What does it do for them?
Gives them a goal to pursue, kind of.
Okay, so it reminds them that you've done this in the past, that we need to continue to do this. Okay, good. It is true that our injuries in many respects are great. Fugitive slave laws, Dred Scott decisions, indictments for treason, and long and dreary months of imprisonment. Okay, so notice that the Dred Scott is a slave who sued in federal court for his and his family's freedom. So what is this? Fugitive slave laws, Dred Scott decisions, indictments for treason, and long and dreary months of imprisonment.
These are the injuries.
Yeah, these are our injuries. These are what we have gone through. And notice, again, it is a concession. So he concedes, I understand we've gone through all these things. The result of the most unfair rules of judicial investigations has been the pay we have received for our solicitude, sympathy, and aid in the dangers and difficulties of those days that tried men's souls. Now here, he's referencing Thomas Paine. Now, you may not know that, and that's fine. But Thomas Paine says he wrote a pamphlet. He's a pamphleteer. So he wrote this discussion of why America is so great, why we should, like, be successful, right? So now, here's this freed slave going, I know what all you white men have said, right? So even your biggest leaders have fought for freedom and sought freedom. All right, that's all I got. Tonight, your homework.